Hello, welcome to Pressure Kitab. It's November 3rd, 2023. We are reading um, sorry, Gopi Krishna, the biography by Terry Degler, and we'll be discussing chapters 4 onwards until everybody else has read. So 4, 5, 6 was supposed to be discussed, so we'll just see based on what has happened as per the reading schedules. I will have to drop off sadly today because I'm at work, but um, I will hand over the mic to all of you guys and I will listen to the recording later. All right, see you guys.
Okay. Um, I guess what I'll say is I caught up on my reading on chapter 3 and then I also read 4. And to me, like, there's just so much description, which we already talked about in the last session, about the connection between um, how he was taking care of his body, the diet, and also I think the changes his mind were going through, which was that at times he didn't feel the need to meditate, but he could still experience certain feelings and sensations regardless. Um, so that's interesting to see that part of the journey. And I mean, the work he did on the social issues impacting women later on, I think was very good to read about, and especially as, like, he took it very much into his own personal life, like he was leading by example. He was applying that to the women in his own life, his daughter, and the way that I think it's described that he conducted her wedding, her marriage functions. So the dowry thing, like the fact that he was very much against dowry, reminds me of my own grandfather, who kind of believes in the same, and he's conducted like similar. And my grandfather must have been one generation younger, I think. So I think there's like that influence I can see has passed on, and I think definitely part of it would have been um, them living through their experiences of knowing the hardship, knowing what it is like to go through in difficult times, and how it makes sense to change the practices to make life a little easier for um, more and more of the society, people in the society. So I think it's a lot about how his experiences have influenced the way he sees the world and how he wants to have an impact on the society around him. So I think that there's a lot of positivity there. And while in chapter 3 we read about some of the signs of Kundalini awakening or creativity or siddhis or this or that, I think this is a much more profound sign of the awakening, which is, the impact that a person might want to have on society in small, meaningful ways or in long lasting ways. So those are the thoughts that came to mind.
Yeah, I think for me, the most beautiful line in chapter 4 was that he even went so far as to state firmly that women were in some ways better adapted biologically for reaching higher states of consciousness than men. It's on page 44. And I just like was really struck by that. I mean, I think for me, what I read so far, his humility is, emphasized several times, not just by Terry, but also by his family members, and that he, in spite of having this elevated state of consciousness, he was, excuse me, he was a Jivan Mukt, right? Which is also known as the state of Sahaj. It's mentioned in another chapter, which is like the highest state of Samadhi, apparently. I think it was mentioned in chapter 5. Uh, and in spite of all that, he's just very humble. And but that line, like he is, I mean, I can see where Rakesh ji's influences are coming from. Because I mean, he profoundly, and one thing I found repeatedly mentioned is this inner divine guidance that's repeatedly mentioned that was guiding him along. And when you talk about siddhis, I think it's mentioned in chapter 5, and I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't read it, but he suddenly has these verses being revealed to him, and that I'm not going to say more than that because I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't read that chapter. But that does happen. The siddhis do happen. But yes, I definitely agree that he was such a principled person, not just in his work, but like you said, in the founding of the Samaj Sudhar Samiti, and the work that he did by that, and especially bringing it to his own daughter, as you mentioned, Shruti ji. I really thought that was it's really remarkable. I mean, especially since he was always surrounded by such a corrupt environment, at least at work. And personally, I think Terry interviewed her, and there was these thoughts of every bride looks forward to her wedding day, and there are expectations of how marvelous it will be, but it wasn't in her case. And yeah, that really, it's like walking the talk, I mean, really embodying it and leading by example, as you said. So yeah, I don't want to get into chapter 6 since I don't know if everybody has read that, but the siddhis do happen. Just so you know. And it's quite, I mean, it's very astonishing. This is the first time I've ever read someone's account of having such an experience, and it is just really, it took me, it was like, it took me by surprise. I didn't know that could actually happen, and it's like reading it and then believing it that this does happen. I mean, and again, I've seen Rakesh T sometimes say that, do you think I really wrote this? There is it's a gift from the goddess. And I see that in like reading about Gopi Krishna, like that's, I'm sorry. Yeah, my son just barged in, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, I mean, I was also impressed by his expression of how he helped in this whole changing of the society around him, and the account of his daughter's marriage was very interesting, and the daughter's feelings were, it looks like Terry has interviewed her, and she I think one of the things that kind of bothered, didn't seem whether she bothered, but she noted that her father would come once in a while and then go back to his room, so he must have been doing his Kundalini yoga at that time. So to some extent, I think she probably must have felt a little bit, it must have been tough for her because, this is a big day in her life, and her father is just coming every now and then, but she seems to have taken it all in stride, and you can see they all love their father quite a bit. So they understand, that he was going through something totally different. And also the fact that the only thing that she felt bad about was not having a full dresser of saris and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting, yeah, chapter 5, I don't want to put anything, but you should read it. I think you'll enjoy the way suddenly these verses come in his mind, and it's just, it's like literally he's seeing the writing falling off, from the sky, and so but as Anamika was saying, that, and as she was talking about Rakesh ji also, right, that, he says that these are not stories that come from him, it's coming from outside. And I found a lot of writers actually mention this, so I've even somebody has like writing, like Stephen King, I've read one of his books in which he talks about the writing process, and he says it's like the way he says this is one of the questions that has never been asked, which is he wished he had been asked, and that is about the writing process, and he says in his thing, the story is already out there, and it's like he's following, somebody has laid the yarn around there, and he's trying to unravel the yarn and following wherever it leads him to, but it's already there somewhere existing, and that he's just following the links to get to that story,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard a lot of writers talk like that, that. So there is some kind of subconsciousness that, and with regard to, of course, I don't want to again reveal anything to Shruti about the chapter 5, but the fact that he's getting these visions, where he's actually seeing this poetry coming out, and it's that too in a language that he hasn't never learned himself. It sounds like really strange. But then I was thinking about Ramanujan, and the guy who was the famous mathematician, right? Who at the age of, I think, 25 or something, he wrote these. He had been studying these. He had just a small little book on mathematics, and he was writing these brilliant equations, and he sent this letter to Hardy, and in England, saying, "Okay, I have some work that I'd like you to have a look at." And these guys look at this work and they say, "Oh my God, these things have already been proven," and he's proving something which has already been proven. So he's obviously not read the actual proofs, but he has come up with his own proofs. And you can see that this Hardy thinks that this guy's either is a genius, or he's just one of these faking, people who's faking, and then he shows it to his colleague, and so they decide to finally, they think that no, this guy seems to have something in him, because he's writing these proofs which are totally mind-boggling, So they actually bring him over to England, and then there's this huge period of like just 4 or 5 years in which this Ramanujan comes up with these fantastic proofs, which even till now they're still trying. He died at a very young age, at around 36, in England. He couldn't deal with the cold there, but he used to always say that these proofs come from Devi, and he would see them in his dreams, and they would be coming there, and and most people, most of the mathematicians who are still studying his work, and even now they're finding new things in his notebooks, so there's the huge number of mathematicians who are still, he's considered like one of the greatest mathematicians ever, and they're still trying to figure out some of his things. But the fact that he had that these things were coming from something from within, and something which he says Devi has written. Normally, most of the people tend to think, "Oh, this is like some exaggeration or something cute, something interesting." But very few people actually take it seriously, and I think maybe there is some reason to take something like that seriously, and say maybe there is something, the creative spirit might be there, something innate within us, and we just have to tap into it. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Those are some thoughts I had when I read this. I've actually gone up to the 8th chapter, so it kind of gets confusing for me where I am, and but
That
regarding yeah.
Yeah, that is something I struggle with sometimes. Like when I want to go ahead, and then I'm like, oh no, but then I'll end up leaking spoilers in the
Yeah.
discussions. But that means it's a very smooth read, and
It is a smooth read, yeah. And these other chapters actually talk more about even some of his further works into his into this fixing of the society around him. So he has actually, there are a lot more examples given in the other chapters. So you'll have a lot of fun reading that. I'll leave it at that.
Looking forward. Probably I'll read a lot on the plane next week.
I also
Yeah, that's what I would.
Oh,
Sorry,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to
No,
say
no.
that. No, I just came saying I also read a lot of this on the plane. I'm right now at my son's house in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I'm spending some time with my granddaughter who's 1.5 years old. So having a good time. But during the flight, I got to read most of the stuff.
Very nice.
I really like the way it's written, though. I mean, it's a good, fairly easy read.
Mm.
And I think that I'm also appreciating all the information about Kashmir that we are getting while reading through these pages. At least I think I managed to make it to chapter 6, but then I realized like there was a very significant, and I'm not going to give the spoiler away, Shruti, but it has to do with how the tribal invasion of 1947 impacted, I would say Rakeshji. I mean, like going down the line of descendants, right? So, but I don't want to give, or let me just say, impacted Gopi Krishna, Pandit Gopi Krishna's family. So I don't want to give it away as to what exactly happened, but you learn about the history of Kashmir. Like she even mentions the Maharaja and the princely state and what was happening then, and what really accelerated his accession to India when he was still kind of on the fence, or at least wanting to be independent. I don't want to say on the fence, but being independent. So I really appreciate all that too. And this last paragraph in chapter 4, I think, was very interesting, where how she mentions how it must have been for his family, and I think this line I really liked was that it has often been observed that it is the spouses and the children of geniuses, revolutionary thinkers, and other historical figures who pay with their unwitting sacrifices some, if not a great deal, of the price for the achievements of this single-minded family member whose goal is changing the world and bettering the lot of all humankind. This is on page 49, and that's the last line. And I thought that was really well said. So I'll let someone else speak if anyone else wants to go.
Yeah, I think Meeraji, you haven't spoken up yet.
I know there's a lot of noise in the background, so I'm just listening. Just listening. But yes, it's a easy read. I really love. I could I could I could just read this book without stopping, but I have the same problem. I wouldn't know when we are discussing where to stop. But definitely loved reading these 3 chapters, and especially about Sudhar Samiti. The he forms that committee. I love that part. Um, Everything actually, everything. The way he describes how verses come to him. Um, Everything. I don't have much to say. You hear the noise in the background. There's a Christmas movie going on, so I just want.
Yeah, I think I like how the for every experience or part of the story, there's a good amount of context of what's happening in the region where Gopi Krishna is at that point in time. A lot of context setting is done, and it gives me great ability to contextualize, visualize. So I appreciate that in Terry's writing a lot. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've covered any.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to actually read his the other book, that he himself wrote, right, on the Kundalini awakening, and compare it with this one. This one, I think she gives, the nice thing about this book is that she gives more details about him than he himself does about his own life, or because he just gives, in his book he concentrates on the Kundalini part of it and his actual experiments with it, and whereas this book actually gives much more detail.
No,
Yeah.
it's interesting because she actually mentions that the job of a biographer is to give context. So just
Right.
reminded of that, Shruti, when you said it, and that's what I think makes it different from his autobiographies. And I forget which chapter it was in. I think maybe it was 5 or 6, but it was the mention of like how there's a lot of focus on his suffering, and that is really not warranted because there were really just 2 periods of intense suffering, right, in those 12 years. I mean, and I think it was the weeks after Christmas 1937, and then the 9 weeks after Christmas 1937, and then approximately 12 weeks following the same holiday in 1943. So I just brought that up not because, I mean, I think I didn't know enough to, when I first started reading, and I was like, what am I going to read about? But this is important because people initially, I think we had the impression, oh, is this worth it and all that, but there's really not an entire like 12 years of suffering. I mean, it couldn't have been easy, but Yeah, so that I think that was good that she clarified that, that there were just 2 periods of really horrible suffering, as she calls it on page 68. I think the other thing that I kind of sensed, the other thing that I kind of was trying to make sense of is like his own experience of this. And I think Rakesh ji asked that that question about chapter 3, where he's asking if, how do you know it's awakening, or it's happening? And I'm not sure. Like, I think for someone to be aware of this, I think you need that kind of, given from the beginning, from the very point of his birth, it was known that he was special and he was different and he was a Vyas, right? Am I saying it right? Which I thought there was only one Vyas, like Ved Vyas, right? But apparently Vyas is a term that's used to describe a sage, and somebody who's learned and like enlightened, I guess. And so from the very beginning, we know that he has this unique and spectacular quality about him. But so if we could just discuss, like, how do you know it's awakening? I think as I made it to chapter 6, I think I realized there are like 3 aspects to it. There is this radiant light, and there's the expanded state of consciousness, and also the sounds that you apparently hear, because he talks about, roars and stuff, right? Like
Buzzing.
Yeah, buzzing in the ears. Yes, thank you. So I was just wondering if anyone had any comments on that. Like, I'm just trying to because I don't, maybe Rakesh hasn't had time to respond, but I didn't know if I had missed something or if anyone else thought differently. I just thought we could maybe talk about that, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if, unless you actually have practiced Kundalini yoga, and then I think only then you can maybe answer some of those questions that you were saying, right? Like, does everybody have the same kind of experiences, or and is it worth actually going for that experience? Because there are a lot of people who just seek the experience seekers, which is like adding something to your it's like um, just like you want to go to a different place in the world, or you want to do some new things, but if you just do it for that, then it's not really a worthwhile thing, right?
Not a
And I don't
bucket
think
list. It's
yeah,
not a
it's like
bucket list
it's not like a
experience.
bucket list, right? It should be something more deeper than that. And obviously to Gopi Krishna it was, but I think there are a lot of people who got actually interested in Kundalini yoga just by reading Gopi Krishna's book, and this is all across United States as well. People were really, it influenced a lot of people. But yeah, I've come across a few other experience from other people who have talked about their experiences in trying to follow this path. But again, there are different ways to do it. And there's Kundalini yoga. There's portions of it in different Vedas as well. And then there's also the agamic texts in Kashmiri Shaivism, and in Tantra, that also allude to this. But I guess there may be different ways of doing it. I don't know. But all of them seem to talk about looking at these chakras within your body and trying to they call it a serpent energy, but it's more somewhere else I read it's more like a spring, which has been forced down, and it just suddenly um, springs out, and that's what I read somewhere else. But of course, all this is just hearsay. I haven't gone through it myself, so I have no idea.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'm also just, trying to imagine what it would have been to live the way he was living, with this, like he said, he constantly kept, I think, a sense of, projecting normalcy about him. About his outside world, at least, and outside of his family, outside of his wife. And Bobby was so, deeply involved in this, and she cared for her husband, And just the
Yeah,
fact that
to me, she must have been a amazing personality. Like to
like
deal with another person like that. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
can't imagine, how tough it must have been for her.
Yeah.
yes, and also this whole part about eating and like I don't know, I forget, I read somewhere that he was drinking quarts of sugarcane juice, I think, in what was it,
Yeah,
chapter 4.
Mhm.
And you know, and he was eating I mean, not all the time, but there was these periods when he had to regain his strength and his energy, and just to have that kind of support from Barbie, I mean, must have been, that's why no wonder he called her like his saving grace, I think, because he said somewhere else in the chapter, or was it chapter 3? I think that said it. Yeah.
I think
yeah.
so.
In some of the chapters further on, I mean, I don't think I'm really giving away too much, but there's these some destitute women who are, some of them are thinking of committing suicide, and he takes them to his house, and and his wife actually is really instrumental in trying to help them out and trying to make sure that they feel okay, and that they're brought out of that sense of depression, because they feel otherwise they might have committed suicide, just because they're
Mm.
considered they, like, other people have tried to take advantage of them, and I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's interesting read there. So, but yeah, you can see that both he and his wife were very, very, very in tune with all the other people and trying to help other people all their life. Yeah.
Mm.
I wonder whether he told her at any point that what he is doing, what he has been practicing, or
He must have. I mean, she must have been aware of it, and whether he told her directly or because she's trying to feed him proper food, and and a lot of times he's refusing to eat. He can't eat a lot of things, but she's trying to
Yeah.
find ways to help him out. So
And he's basically meditating for hours in the morning, right? So that's
right,
not something that can go unnoticed.
right.
So yeah, she has to have known. Yeah.
It's like my, to think of my grandfather. He used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd be meditating for about 4 hours. He'd be putting this chadar on his head, and he'd be in deep meditation. For 4 hours continuously. Without stop. And I think his wife was totally opposite type. My grandmother, she was a total woman of the world, and she was, dealing with the all, and very very social, and you know but it must, I sometimes wonder, how so they would be totally opposite personalities, and yeah, how they would manage to get along is amazing.
Yeah, sometimes it's astonishing how like two people can complement each other while being so different, and at the same time similar people can also support each
Right,
other uh,
right,
so well. So there's no, like, there's just many combinations that work. It's the people involved who have to want to make it work, I think.
right.
Yeah.
Meera, she actually mentions on page 28 that, even though Barbie was a simple woman who might not have ever totally grasped what her husband wrote about,
Hmm.
indeed, she had never learned to read. She was filled with love, tenderness, and dedication for her husband and her family. So, from the night of his wedding in 1925 onward, Gopi Krishna would not be entirely alone in his struggle. So, I think that speaks to what you were asking. That even though she might not have fully grasped what he wrote about, she was still such a big support for him. That he never felt alone in what
Mm.
he was going through. But I think meditation is how it started for him, though, right? If I understand from the reading
Mm.
that, and then there were times when he had to stop himself from meditating, or else it would. I mean, those are the parts that I'm not,
Yeah.
fully clear
Yeah.
on. But that's I think,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I felt the same. Like, I had that same description, like, made me wonder the same thing. Is like, how was it that he felt like, I have to stop meditating now? Like, I don't and he just stopped for a few years, I think, until he slowly felt the desire to engage in it again. So I feel like they've just touched upon that change in him yet, and we don't know more about what
So
he was
did
experiencing.
he actually fully stop it? I don't remember now. Maybe he did.
Yes.
Yes, he did stop for a little bit and
Mm.
then he comes back. But I think yoga itself is a very strenuous process. I think it changes you from inside out. If you really follow all the steps, I think it's very strenuous. I I have experienced it little bit. I'm just saying little bit, not much, but yes, it's a strenuous. If you follow everything, if you follow those yamas, niyamas, everything, then it becomes real little strenuous, and you kind of feel. I felt kind of detached from everything and everybody. So you just, I mean, I didn't like that. I did not like that.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting because that's exactly what he speaks about, right? That he felt that sense of
it's at
detachment,
a
and he also
different
didn't
level,
like it.
it's a completely different level. So yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and being in the world while also being in that state of consciousness, that elevated state, was actually harder than somebody who would have just taken off to be a renunciate or something. Right? I think she talks about that too.
yeah. So, was there anything else that you want to cover in this?
Yeah, I think also I was fascinated that he was that she keeps mentioning it periodically that he was speaking to people in the West, and like you already mentioned, Rajendraji, that there is a huge interest in. I mean, that came about after his autobiography came out, I guess. Um, so I'm really curious to see how that really develops and what's when did that actually start. But I haven't read that far, and because that I think in the few chapters that were covered for today, they do mention that people start to notice him in that state of consciousness at work and at
Yeah,
and then they started coming to his home.
yeah. In I guess chapter 5 and further, right? They talk about the fact that that he was writing these verses on his own, and so people started get to know about him, and they started actually trying to pester him with their problems and thinking that he could heal them. And he used to feel really bad that he says, no, I can't really heal you. I don't have any powers or anything, but as a human being he would still listen to their uh, you know to their problems and try his best to help them in any way he could, but yeah, it was people were started coming to him, and he became noticed.
Yeah, and yeah, please go ahead. Oh, and
I don't have yeah,
sorry.
I don't have anything more to add, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just I have the book open in front of me, and they're just something or the other pops out at me.
Right.
So this page, and even in chapter 3, I think he mentions how I know it's not part of chapter 4, but he was repulsed by food so much at a point and able to sleep so sporadically that he even went to this holy man, a sadhus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of them tried to force him to eat a large plate of food, and that caused some frightening spasms of pain.
Right.
So, then he even gave up trying to go to a sage for help. So, I mean, it's just like putting myself in his shoes, and like this is 19. I don't know, what are we talking about here? Which year is this?
43, I think.
Yeah,
1914.
even earlier than that, right? This is chapter 3. But how must it have felt? Like I'm just thinking about that, and to have this experience. And there is often he's made some allusions, right? That he's people might think he's mad, or that he's
Right. And
that.
Yeah, and his brother-in-law has told him that, that this is a very dangerous thing, and he has heard of people, becoming mad
Yeah.
by doing so. So it must have been there in his mind. Am I getting mad, or you know?
I
I,
I also wanted to touch on the point that he was driven to the point where he felt I cannot live any longer like this. It's too much
yeah,
pain.
yeah,
And the turning point that at least I read in that chapter was he saw his young boy of 4 years old sitting quietly and eating his own meal with a lot of rapture and
right,
enjoyment. And
right.
that is what sort of turned him around. So I think that was very beautiful and intriguing. Like it was not he was not able to bring himself out of it. His son's presence somehow brought about that healing in him. I don't know why, but I think it was very interesting.
Yeah, that was quite a yeah. That was also. I also remember reading that part and being struck by it, because he was trying all these different things, nothing was working, and then just this one thing, just seeing his son eating with total enjoyment, suddenly made him
Yeah.
read.
It's
Yeah,
in a way it's like, his son was in a one pointed state where his focus
right,
was on food, and that was like an inspiration to him, maybe. I don't know.
right.
Yeah.
Could have been, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that could have.
But yeah, definitely the whole emphasis on how this is anybody can do this, right? He said this exists in everyone, right? The potential is there. I think that's what the humility was just really striking, and he's clearly not a normal or like an ordinary person, but he never had any illusions about. I mean, he never had any self grandeur or anything of that sort, and it's just really remarkable. I'm just amazed that I'm so glad we're reading this.
I can't wait to read Kundalini. I have been waiting for a long time.
So, as Amrita would say, so if we have to read Kundalini, then we have to get through this book at a good pace. So
Right.
probably for next week, we should aim for the next three chapters, 7, 8, and 9. And actually, chapter 9 talks about how to call for research into Kundalini, which is the topic I think Miraji wants to get to quickly. Um, hmm.
Oh yeah,
So does it? So everybody has the book by now, right?
I hope so. I don't know if Aarti hasn't joined yet. She was supposed to get it last weekend. So I don't know if she did or if she's still waiting. I don't know. Because
So,
someone was bringing it to her from India.
Yes.
so I was just going to ask, what did people think about Rakesh ji's rewriting of chapter 3, that section?
Oh,
Oh,
that's
that was
beautiful.
beautiful.
I could reread that 5, 6
Yes, that he just has a way to bring the characters alive.
Yeah,
And and I feel like there's a distinct difference between his writing and the way Terry is telling the story, right? She's
right.
like he almost said it in that one, like in the first person,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's
Yeah.
whereas she's narrating it more from like
That's
it
true. Yeah,
sounds more like a narration, right?
Yeah. And now,
So
whether that is because he is talking about someone who's like family and he can put
right.
himself in their shoes,
right.
or whether it's just genuinely his ability to put himself in another's shoes, regardless of family or not family. Like, I think pretty spectacular.
I think it's both of those. Yeah, I think he has a good ability to imagine himself in the same position and how he would have felt, or how.
Yeah, and he also has this emphasis on rasa or ras, right?
Right.
And that has to come through. So I I mean, I guess he has that. He keeps saying, "I do you think I really could have written this?" So he has that divine gift too, and
Yeah.
it must feel good to have that. Like when you read chapters 5 and 6, Shruti, it feels great to read that he like what he experiences in terms of what Rajendra ji was saying earlier, like how he was getting these
Hmm.
verses uh, the first one happened on Tavi Bridge in Jammu. And I couldn't help but mention that because that's where it starts. But it's pretty amazing.
Nice.
And it just starts just like so randomly, right? He's just walking with this other lady who's part of this samiti, and suddenly these words come in his. Anyway, I don't want to spoil the fun for Shruti.
I'll get there in another 30
Yeah,
minutes after we
yeah.
end the call.
I think we have run out of stuff for this, right?
Possibly. I think so.
Yeah.
Mm.
For this chapter, right?
So the next time we meet, we are reading.
We will be discussing, I think, 7, 8, and 9 to keep on to the same pace.
And we'll probably revise. We didn't talk about 5 and 6
5
much
and 6
because-
too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
but we can do a little bit of
yeah,
quick go through those. Yeah. But
yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Going all the way up to 9 would be a good idea.
Setting that target, and then we'll see how far we go. If we start falling too much behind, then we'll have to rein ourselves in. But yeah, I think for now we can try.
And hopefully you can make it for the meeting, right?
Friday morning, probably not next week, because I would have been I might be actually traveling at that time. So yeah, maybe not next week, but I will see if I can put some of my thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great trip. Which places are you going to in India?
I don't know if we can stop recording first. Let me see.
Yeah, sorry, no, I didn't mean to. I forgot
Yeah, I
we're
don't
not
know.
born.
I don't know honestly how to do that. But yeah, I am going to my grandparents in Jammu and then my own home in Pune. So those are the main two places I'll be spending time.
Have a good time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, have a great trip. You're going to
Thank-
India? Oh, nice.
Yeah, yep. Next week.
I wish you a safe journey, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun.
Yes, definitely looking forward to it. All right.
All right.
I think that's it. We call it a night and have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a
Yeah.
great
too.
weekend.
You too. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.